This presentation explores the development of critical multimodal literacies in world language classroom through digital storytelling project. We will first present the pedagogical model that we designed based on New London Group's Pedagogy of Multiliteracies. The model was implemented in Japanese language classroom at a college in the U.S. Based on the analysis of multiple data sources, we then demonstrate how students furthered their meta-awareness of the significant role multimodality plays in communicating messages and became critical evaluators of multimodal literacies. World language education has long privileged the written and spoken language narrowly defined. However, there is an increased and urgent need to widen what is regarded as literacy and to develop students' multimodal communicative competence in light of the changing landscapes of literacy practices that we engage in today. Particularly, recent advancement of digital communication tools has necessitated a heightened awareness on how to make meanings with multiple modes. In world language education, digital storytelling is one such effort to nurture students' multimodal literacies. Digital storytelling entails students' production of a 3 to 5 minute long digital video where the creator narrates a deeply personal story with the help of video and a series of still images, allowing students to showcase their awareness in using a variety of modes to communicate complex emotions. The project was conducted in the second-year Japanese language classroom in fall 2013 at a private women's college in the U.S. The course curriculum was organized around an elementary Japanese textbook. The course met 5 days a week for 14 weeks, and the work for the project began on the 5th week and continued until the end of the semester. 18 students in 2 sections participated in the project. The assigned topic for the project was An Important Thing in My Life or My Unforgettable Experience. The project sought to have students critically reflect on their own life and to think about and communicate a personal message based on their experience. In order to raise critical awareness of multimodal meaning-making, we carefully designed the instructional steps for the project, incorporating the 4 pedagogical components of the Pedagogy of Multiliteracies: situated practice, overt instruction, critical framing, and transformed practice. These components are not linear steps, but are interrelated elements that may occur simultaneously and may be revisited at different stages. The project started with Phase 1, Critical Multimodal Reading Phase. The first activity was a discussion of their own experience and engagement with various types of media. This reflected situated practice, which is immersion in experience and the utilization of available designs of meaning that invokes and draws on students' funds of knowledge from their life worlds. Then students watched a digital story created by a Japanese youth and discussed their general impressions of the story and possible sources for such impressions. This activity encouraged students to reflect on the multimodal effects of music, images, and the tone of voice, and to activate the students' multimodal meaning awareness brought from their various literacy practices. Following the discussion, students in pairs worked on a series of tasks. First, they were asked to fill in the missing words in the transcript of the story. It aimed at facilitating their understanding of the message while paying attention to the choice of words and textual composition. Second, the students were guided to identify each paragraph's function within the story by matching a list of paragraph functions in English to each paragraph, thereby raising awareness of textual features such as discourse structures. This was a form of overt instruction, which was the instruction and intervention by the teacher to introduce students to meta-languages necessary to raise their awareness and control over design elements and process. Students then shifted their focus to the use of multimodal resources. They discussed whether and how different modes are enhancing each other for the quality of the story. In other words, the students were guided to critically evaluate the multimodal design choices, which reflects critical framing. It guided students to stand back and frame what they have learned in relation to the historical, sociocultural, and political context of particular designs of meaning. Lastly, the students were asked to share their opinions on the author's intended audiences and the reasons for telling the story. By instructing students to think about the social purposes of digital storytelling, the activity was meant to have critically frame their understanding of the multimodal media. All activities in this phase were to activate their resources for designing their own digital stories in the next phase. In Phase 2, Critical Multimodal Designing Phase, students began thinking about their own story. First, each student brought ideas from their story to class, shared the ideas with her peers, and received questions and feedback. Based on the peer exchanges, students revised their initial ideas and wrote the first draft of their story. This was a form of transformed practice where students transferred their knowledge gained in overt instruction and critical framing into a new context, applying their own purposes of meaning-making. The students revised their story twice, receiving feedback from the teacher each time. The first feedback was to guide students to pay attention to the importance of communicating message, and the second was more on the use of language to encourage them to be more conscious about their choice of words and expressions. The pedagogy at work here was overt instruction as the teacher guided students to get a more adequate conceptualization of genre. Next, a workshop by an educational technology staff was held at the college's computer lab. In the workshop, students learned how to use the software for creating a digital story and about issues such as copyrighted materials. The students started creating their story in class and continued after class. Phase 3, Presenting and Reflecting on Multimodal Design phase, was the end of the semester event when the students presented their stories in front of the classmates and guests. They began their presentation with a brief introduction of their story, and after showing the video, they talked about their reflection on the process of the project and answered questions from the audience. The students also evaluated each other's video in writing. As a conclusion of the project, the students engaged in self-evaluation and answered the survey about the project. Drawing on the classroom discussions, we first discussed students' discovery and sharing of knowledge regarding the use and effects of multimodal elements in communicating message. Then we analyzed how their understanding of multimodality was put to use in their final videos. To access the students' perspective, we used additional data, namely post-project surveys and individual interviews. During critical multimodal reading phase, all students shared their thoughts about the important role different modes played in the sample video. The students noticed that many pictures in the video did not necessarily correspond to the words spoken, but rather they represented the narrator's feelings in a symbolic way. They also noted the color and tone of the images as important in communicating the mood of the story. One student said that the shift in the selection of images from darker tones to colorful ones captured the transformation of the author's feeling and thinking, thus contributing to storytelling. Students thought the music was peaceful and reflective, and it helped enhance the mood without overpowering the narration. Now we discuss how their meta-knowledge of multimodality was utilized in their final product by analyzing two videos created by Genni and Ping. Genni was a sophomore student and a Japanese major. Genni's story, entitled Finding My Passion, was about her unforgettable childhood experience when she discovered her passion about books through her best friend's love for reading. Her story consists of 4 parts that can be summarized as background, introducing her best friend, describing a critical incident, and reflecting on that experience. She used 20 still images in her story, and a soft piano music plays in the background throughout the story. One of the most notable features of Genni's video is her use of visual images. In designing the multimodal text, Genni used her own photos minimally. The rest were all abstract pictures that symbolically captured the feeling of her story. After the title slide, she begins telling the story with an image of a compass and the written words, "Where will you go?" The series of images that follow, an antique map of Europe, a road in the woods, and a black blank screen, set the tone of the story, representing her feeling of being lost and emptiness. In describing the friendship with her best friend, Genni used a picture of two trees with slightly different shapes standing next to each other with the moon and the sun as their background. The image captured their friendship. They are similar yet different. They are complementary and indispensable to each other. She ends her story with an image of a sunset with her voiceover. "Because this passion is my most favorite thing in my life, I can never forget this experience." She explained in her interview that the sunset symbolizes the end of something, but at the same time it is also the beginning of new things. As an avid reader and aspiring novel writer, Genni was particularly conscious of the importance of images and emotions that the story inspires. She articulated the difference between language-based writing and multimodal designing in the interview. Video is easier to show what they mean because of physical representation. You are able to show what you want to say. In writing, you have to manipulate the words so that the readers can see what you mean. I captured the emotion first, figure out what could symbolize the emotion in the right way, and then make sure the pictures match it. By carefully choosing images with an attention to tones and colors, Genni successfully communicated her message to the audience. Ping was an international student from China who was a sophomore majoring in biology with studio art minor. Her story, entitled Unforgettable Experience, consists of 4 distinct scenes typical of Japanese and Chinese narrative structure. One evening she found a beetle in her room and asked her mother to kill it by flushing down in the toilet. Throughout the night she kept on hearing the cry of the beetle in the toilet and regretted that she killed it. One summer she visited Shenzhen, China, and saw beetles crawling on the burning desert sand, making all-out efforts to live in such a harsh environment. Recalling the night when she killed the beetle, she put forward a message that humans should care for the preciousness of all things alive. Ping's video consists of 32 screens with her own artistically sketched manga-like images, except for one. Unlike Genni's use of abstract images, Ping's images directly depicted what she was narrating. She chose 4 short music pieces taken from an anime show which corresponded well to the development of the story, starting off with muted gongs and percussion sounds for creating a scary, mysterious atmosphere, shifting to a high-pitched keyboard melody for the feeling of suspense and sadness, then to a slow, quiet keyboard melody with whistle and bells that create a feeling of hopefulness. Then finally ending with an inspirational music that is somewhat heartwarming. She explained for her orchestrations of drawing, music, and narration as, "I wanted to keep my story, images, and the music consistent, so I drew the pictures myself. I chose the music first, which could create a mysterious atmosphere, and then changed my speed of reading and my tones according to the music." There are 3 visual techniques Ping used to design her story that are noteworthy. First, Ping strategically integrated words both typed and handwritten on screens. Each screen was demarcated by a black screen with a word indicating the time reference in the white Gothic font at the bottom right corner. She explained that the use of written text was to create suspense and intensity, to draw audience attention, and to make the audience think. She further explained that the handwritten words were there to help her audience follow the story, indicating her awareness of the audience. Second, Ping manipulated images using the Photoshop and created effects. For almost the entire second scene, she used a drawing of her close-up face with her pupils moving around to look at different directions, while her narration describes her hearing of the Beatles' sad crying coming from the toilet all night. The eye movements communicated her feeling of nervousness. She also used the animated effect to show the Beatles in the burning desert appearing one after the other, evoking the emotion of strength and endurance of tiny insects. Further, Ping juxtaposed a drawing of human scale by Da Vinci and an image of a body of a beetle, while zooming on the image of human scale, then gradually moving to that of a beetle. She drew audiences' attention to their striking similarities of two body structures, which was the point she wanted to convey. Third, Ping effectively used the colors in designing her story. Throughout the story, she only used black and white. At the very end, when she called on the audience to care for other species' lives, she symbolically used a watercolor drawing of a beetle flying over the field. With a distinct change in her drawing style from a detailed manga-like sketch to a soft impressionism style, and the contrast in colors from the black and white to the pastel tone, she expertly represented her important message that insects are beautiful and lively. During the question and answer sessions after the video presentations, the audience asked about the producer's choice of pictures and music in addition to usual questions about the message of the story. Every student producer was able to articulate the reasons behind her choice for various modes. These interactions were all done in Japanese. Because of the personal nature of the assigned topic, the students were forced to self-reflect and relive their experiences, which led them to learn about themselves. One student wrote in her self-evaluation, "I learned about myself," and another wrote, "I was also able to relive my memories. It felt like a cathartic experience to create something from some emotional and painful experience." In the process of designing their story, the students negotiated not only what story and how much details they tell, but also how they wanted to represent themselves through the story. During the interview, Genni said, "I want them to think that I am not totally superficial because I don't really act like how I wrote this. I don't act particularly thoughtful, like deep and serious. But I think people can be different when they're writing and speaking. When I write, it's about figuring out what you don't talk about." Negotiation of identity and self-representation are an important function of language and literacy practices, yet students usually do not get many opportunities to do so in a world language classroom. Through their participation in the digital storytelling project, the students were able to position themselves as knowledgeable communicators rather than incomplete language learners by effectively accomplishing self-expression and exercising their agency. In this presentation, we demonstrated that the project afforded the opportunity for the learners to draw on a variety of design elements than they would have in a monomodal literacy activity. The multimodal elements were used not just to decorate, but to create a new meaning. It is worth noting that in the digital storytelling project, the students also became critical evaluators of multimodal literacy. The heightened awareness was observed not only in their own product, but also in the curiosity in others' modal choices. We cannot emphasize enough the importance of projects that encourage the world language learners to be intentional and purposeful in designing a text for assisting them to become the designers of their future self and of their language use.